Well, thanks, Brian, for joining us on site here at ADAPT's 10th Connected Cloud and Data Centre Edge. And today's theme's about leading modernisation while balancing complexity and ensuring compliance. And thinking about your role, what does that theme mean to you?
For me, it's not actually about managing complexity. It's about managing outcomes and framing those in terms of business problems to be solved. The complexity of technology underlying that stuff, there's some really good patterns that are out there in the marketplace that you can buy, lean on, etc. But the technology complexity is dwarfed by the way that the business needs to change. And being a new entrant to higher education, we've got a lot of really smart people in our business that actually know technology better than we do. But as far as converting good practice and research and building partnerships goes, it's very much a green field. And historically, universities have been fairly conservative in their approach because they've invested a lot in the teaching and learning and research side of the business, which is where they should be investing, but it means that the underlying platforms have not taken advantage of change.
Fantastic. And I guess, as we were kind of talking about a little bit earlier, the higher education sector is at a bit of an inflection point. So the way that students are interacting with education services seems like it's changing. And thinking about some of that complexity that you've got and thinking about your approach to perhaps making some of these changes, what have been some of the barriers and how are you trying to overcome those?
I'll start with the business barriers and then I'll move across into the things that have challenged us from a technology viewpoint. UTS is a young university. It has a very impressive campus at the end of the CBD. While I work in a very old style floor, most of the campus is very leading edge in its presentation, its underlying technology. The student spaces are awesome, and I love being able to go and see and play and experience that. And it is very much an on-campus first learning experience. With the underlying technology shifts that had to happen at the start of COVID, we went from 100% on campus through to 100% off campus. And that occurred over probably about 3 weeks as the first tranche of that. So that was a massive change. It was a massive challenge to the way that the university thought of itself. With the loss of the international students, that is not a COVID's over, turn it back on type thing. There's been a huge shift in the international market. For all of the students we lost in the first year of COVID, that's 3 years of students or 4 years of students that have just not come. And all of the students we lost last year, again, they've just not come. They're starting their studies overseas. They're working with other universities that are better positioned for an online experience. Some of the markets opened up earlier, so they've been able to divert to those. We're starting to get a return of those students this year, but realistically we're looking at a 3 to 4 year impact to our revenues, and I hate to think of it in terms of revenues, but those student numbers really do drive revenues. So we've not only got a change in entire methodology and philosophy around teaching, we've got a reduced revenue base to do it. We've also got a number of strategic outcomes we need to aim for as the business was transforming anyway. Underlying technology viewpoint, we had to turn on some very expensive services in very short time frame while complying with our governance requirements. which I'm still learning, to be able to turn on those services quickly. And people look at those services and think, this is costing us $700,000 US to provide this per year. And when you're talking about that, people think of that in just raw dollars. My preferred mechanism to look at it is much more in line with what I've heard of an old Woolworths model, which is how many cans of soup do you need to sell to be able to pay for this? And if you look at it in that light, it's how many students do you need to have on board before this is justified? So if we're looking at the 3,500, 4,500 students that are in China, investing $700,000 in a particular solution to enable that and to enable them to access all they need, the money is trivial in that regard. So framing the conversation as far as business need, business opportunity, student outcomes means that those technical things that we need to do become much more simple decisions, and they're actually be able to be made by the business leaders that are empowered to actually deliver those services. And it's also challenging them to actually make those decisions, because previously those decisions were obscured by the fact that we had this awesome physical campus and everything was provided through that. And that continues us to challenge us with new things that are required.
Fantastic. And I think one of the key things that I was hearing as we went through then, experience. So experience of the student, experience of your academic staff, and experience of your corporate and your developer staff as well. And the experience seems to cut through a lot of these financing, the change in funding model that you need, that sort of almost starting with what value that you perceive being able to deliver to either a student who is here in Sydney, elsewhere in Australia, elsewhere in the world, and trying to give them the best of both worlds almost. So not only getting that academic experience, but also that networking experience and some of that job readiness that a lot of graduates and particularly companies are looking for now, particularly when we think about things like cloud, trying to help organisations to overcome some of the complexities of perhaps going too fast into public cloud and maybe having to remedy some of the issues that result. So thinking about some of the work streams that you're working on, thinking about some of the innovation and transformation that you're trying to drive, and particularly thinking about how you prioritise those different streams of work, what are some of your approaches to overcome these challenges?
It's probably best summarised by the fact that this is the first organisation, the first time I've tried to do this, where I've had organisational change as a part of my base capability. So the journey is made more complex by the fact that you have people involved, and those people are essential for actually making that journey possible. So the opportunity for innovation starts with the people and it ends with the people. Building partnerships with vendors, building a technical capability around a skill is essential, and it's the only way that you'll succeed, but you need to start with the people, and the opportunity for innovation comes from the people. So be it people that are in the business and have great ideas about how they want to run their business, how they can move to a hybrid teaching approach, which is not something we do really well at the moment. It's something that and the entire industry doesn't do that as well as it needs to. They do online, they do offline. Combining those two into a seamless experience is something that one of my teams is heavily invested in working through at the moment, but it's starting from the people. So you build the capability, you build the culture you need, you build the environment. It then gives you the ability to innovate with technology. You can onboard partnerships with people. We're currently going through and looking at establishing partnerships around technology approaches which have not yet hit market, and positioning UTS as a place where those partners can use us effectively as a live lab for things that they want to bring to market. It allows us to be ahead of the curve in a way of being able to take advantage of things as they are hitting market. It allows us to embolden our staff to be able to explore new technology, new trends. It enables us to reach out into research and advisory type services to find out where things are going and bringing that to bear, and really take that local experience and that local advisory to be able to guide us as to what could be possible as to what is there now. So in taking all of those different approaches, and I could talk to the actual underlying technology innovation you could do, the innovation has to be driven by people. You have to give them tools to be able to learn fast, as opposed to what the big companies in the technology space saying around fail fast. For me, it's around learn fast. And the only way that you can learn fast is to create safety. Mm-hmm. So remove the risk of regret spend, remove the risk of creating tech debt, remove the risk of sinking so much investment in something that you can't just walk away from it if it feels like it's bad. So innovation for me is around building the right culture, building the right capability to learn, giving them tools that make it safe, and then establishing partnerships with people, teams, organisations that can then overlay on that, and you can take advantage of, say, moving to 5G before it's a reality in market, positioning yourself for 6G before it becomes in market, working with technology leaders who are still innovating as opposed to acquiring technology, to bring that to bear to shorten our journey, but also add value back into those partners. Because when most people think of partners these days, they go, what can I get from my partner? And being able to work on that level of what can I give them? What experience can I give them? We have a lot of really smart students in our environment, and I'm building an internship program. I was hoping to start it at the beginning of the year, but I wasn't able to, which is primarily going to be focused on providing solid opportunities, and primarily for female students, but not exclusively, so that they can get an entry path into the IT industry. They can bring their thoughts out of their learning, their experiences in their part of this cultural mix, and not just from technology and engineering degrees, but from design, architecture, social sciences, actual sciences, business, and bring all of those people together and get them working together in, to steal an Amazon thing, two pizza style size teams, mm-hmm. to be able to actually create opportunities for innovation and bring in SMEs either from the existing teams or from market to actually provide them with the support, find them mentors in industry, not just IT, but industry, to show them and role model what they need to do and create the environment. And we'll keep some of those people to be able to turn them into the change advocates and catalysts over the next few years. We'll lose the best of them to market, as we should, but just to create that environment where mm-hmm. people can safely learn and safely learn quickly, yeah. and then hopefully become not just a leader in innovation within the university sector, but actually lead innovation for Australian mm-hmm. companies more broadly.
Absolutely, and it's, just thinking about that live lab idea. I mean, we look overseas and there are some certain locations where innovation is celebrated, venture capitalism feeds in, and we haven't yet replicated that here. And what I heard you sort of saying through that discussion was, okay, so we start with the people, we get the culture right, we bring in the right types of partners, and we encourage safety towards delivering value. So getting that return on value, changing that funding conversation so that people feel invested in trying out new ways, being curious, being open to
Yep.
new opportunities. And I guess what we're really describing is how we build that platform for innovation. So university has a place here and industry here, and that connection between the two and cadetships and what upskilling and recycling programs that organisations are running. And it's a rich tapestry really, which when you were talking about bringing the social sciences, the business people and everyone else together, I was kind of thinking that DevOps kind of mindset, how you bring in the right kinds of patterns to encourage the right kinds of innovation to then deliver value that's going to be sustainable with things like 5G or IoT or things like that.
So a lot of the things that I've found in the university are very traditional IT. ClickOps is the best way I've got of describing it, where people are going into consoles and clicking on things and making things happen, or they're logging into a server and manually running a script. And that very old school way of doing it, it's not that it doesn't work or doesn't have its place, but what it doesn't allow you to do is actually move quickly enough and agilely enough. The challenge in moving that to a DevOps type thing, and I'll break that down a little bit further, doing everything by code, infra as code, you've got your applications already in code, building those together, that's really moving to that DevOps type of world. It actually needs to go a step further than that because it has to be built secure by design. So that entire movement to DevSecOps as opposed to just DevOps is really key, and it means embedding in an automated way underneath it so that the DevOps, you build it, you run it, you own it, you improve it, you understand the commercials, whether it's through showback or cost back or however it is, you build a team that's able to do it. And that requires a couple of different changes organisationally, moving from a traditional technology focused team, be it a SaaS offering or an on-prem stuff, moving that across to a more product-centric view. And that's also one of the changes that we're looking at currently and trying to work out how to accelerate that, primarily in support of a business change that's washing through with our new COO. And so there's a lot of things to do with that, creating a CI/CD pipeline that automatically gets peer reviewed using paired coding techniques, automated security, quality, human-centered design, integrating that into service management because you still need auditability and control and change and release to happen, automating all of those integrations, automating those approval processes, getting machine learning telling you whether or not you can automate further and automate change and automate approvals, or whether or not, hey, this fits a slightly different process, it actually needs eyes on it, and making those the right calls rather than having to do it traditionally where every single eye has to touch it. So there's a lot that goes into that question, and DevOps nicely makes it sound really easy. But until you get all of those simple automations and those simple integrations, and you make all of that stuff, and my favourite word is automagically, until you get that working automagically so that you don't have to understand the process to make it operate, and none of us these days really know how a car works or a TV works. They just work automagically, and it's got to be the same for enabling developers, enabling the business, enabling the technologists to be able to work on the stuff that they're good at and not have to know how everything else works.
And so removing engineering toil, removing business burden, and almost to take it a step further, if we're automagically making some of these these overhead things happen, then we then get to the point about how you automate financing. So things like DevOps, and like you say, it's a simple label with lots of complex things underneath. But when we think about trying to run a DevOps process or an agile process through static funding gates, then how do you get to that value? How do you prove that value back to the business?
And this is a topic that I'm actually reading way too many books on at the moment. So in the same way that you have DevOps, you have FinOps, and that journey and unlocking that and being able to move to not only managing costs, but making cost appropriate to the business needs. So if the business needs to expand capacity, say when we're trying to onboard 10,000 students at the start, well, it's actually more, but 10,000 students at the start of the year, you need everything to scale and you need everything to be highly performant and you need it to be robust, but that's got a cost. And so making finance work in that FinOps style way is a really big challenge. In the university, we work on an annual funding. We get a lump of cash that starts January to December. At the end of the year, we get a new lump of cash. We also get research grants. And research grants run for the length of a research period. So if somebody's doing their PhD, generally it's 3 years, they'll do their study. At the end of it, they'll demonstrate what they've done, they'll have their piece of original thought, they'll have written their thesis and supported it, and we've got another doctor in the community. But that's the point where we actually get paid the research grant. So we've got to have a model that allows them to do that. And with a move to cloud, that gets even harder because the traditional model for doing research grants was around bits of tin. And so that entire financial model, especially if we're going into a cloud environment, has to change. Mm-hmm. And some of the universities are doing that really quite innovatively. We need to take those learnings and do it more innovatively. And so that's where I'm getting really excited at the moment. And I used to be a technologist. These days I mostly am dealing with change and people and business outcomes and transferring my knowledge into that new way of operating, mm-hmm. and then trying to bring through my team who are changing from very click ops into that world as well.
Absolutely. And you know, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road as well, that people, that culture change as well. And just one last question. So if you were going to leave one thought with the Adapt community here at the Connected Cloud and Data Center Edge, what would it be?
Start with your people. You've got to think about the change in terms of the real people. Be it your customers, be it your staff, be it your providers, your partners. Start with the people. Look at what the outcomes are that they need to achieve, because that will then start to give you your requirements, and it will give you something that you can assess your progress against. So if I look at the people I need to care about, it's the students, researchers and academics, and what they need and how that works. And to be able to do that, I go out and I talk to those people. I go find a student, buy them a cup of coffee through the appropriate mechanisms and ask them how things are going. I go out to the faculty general managers, I go out to the lecturers, I go out to the researchers. I employ students into my teams for casual opportunities. I've got graduates, I've got partners that I work with, and I bring them in to work within that environment. And start with the people, gives you your requirements. It also lets you measure your success in the long term. Because if the people aren't growing, developing and achieving, then it's just going to be a technology question and then you'll fail.